I'm Andrew, and I'm setting out to make better videos for diesel enthusiasts. Follow along as I review products, do how-tos, and share my personal trucks here on Just Diesels. What's up guys, Andrew here, and today we have two very special trucks behind me. I'm gonna be answering a question that I think a lot of you guys have reached out to me about. It's basically, should you buy a new truck or an older truck and try and make it new, right? So I have my 2006 Ram 2500, it's a third gen, and then I drove down here to CJC Off-Road. I stopped by on a road trip to check out Cole's 2019 Plus Ram 2500. Both of these trucks are almost identical. They both have car suspension 3-inch Dominator systems. They both have 37s. They both have 20-inch trail-ready wheels. They both have a lot of similarities. They both have stock engines, stock transmission. This is a great comparison head-to-head to see what it's really like to have an older truck or a newer truck. And I have put my camp squarely in the old truck platforms, but let's answer why that might be. So instead of just blabbing at you guys, I figured I'm gonna take both these trucks for a drive and actually tell you what it's like to drive them, especially back to back. And I'm really curious because I spent a lot of time in mine. I actually just came off a big road trip in it. So I'm really curious to drive that back to back with Cole's and see what they're like head to head. So let's jump in the trucks. I'll take you guys for a ride and see what it's actually like driving these things. This is a 2020 Ram 2500. At this point in time, this is or might be one of the most luxurious heavy-duty trucks. I think Ford is giving them a very good run for their money. But when this truck came out in 2019 with the complete interior redesign, the vertical giant Tesla-style screen, tons of updates to the actual chassis of the truck, the suspension, pretty much everything on this truck got updated in 19. I mean, this is a very, very nice truck. So let's dive into why you might want this truck over an old truck. I think the biggest thing and the most obvious thing is going to be comfort, and that's really going to come from the interior of the truck. In terms of just how comfortable it is to sit in, how nice everything feels, it's not even close. The third gens kind of come from that Daimler Chrysler cheap parts bin era where a lot of the parts were really shared. So like the steering wheel on my truck is the same thing from like a PT Cruiser. You know, they're really trying to cut costs. This truck is kind of Chrysler's reinvention of the heavy-duty platform, and I guess their whole truck line, to really make things more luxurious. You know, they see customers kind of wanting luxurious interiors, and they leaned into that completely with this interior redesign. And I always see online people complaining like, you know, nice truck interiors are for wussies, right? I'm a man, I want my roll-up windows, I don't want AC, all this stuff. And that's cool. Like if you think that your manhood is based on not being comfortable in your truck, that's fine. But I have a feeling that myself and a lot of people, like, it's kind of nice to have heated seats. It's nice to be comfortable in the interior of your truck. It's nice to have a big infotainment system and a cool sound system, because if you're spending a lot of time in your truck, why be miserable? Like, why not be really comfortable in your truck? And that's where these things excel. If you have a family, if you're doing long road trips, if you're commuting in your truck every single day of work, or if you're working out of your truck, there's something to be said for having a really nice, comfortable interior. And the third gens and older trucks just can't compare in that sense. They just don't have the interior comfort. They don't have the materials quality. They're just not there. If I got to spend a 12-hour road trip in a truck, you better believe I'm going to choose this one over my truck. The other big difference is power. In terms of power output, I could easily get my truck to the power numbers that this one is at. But what's really cool is that these trucks out of the box, you're gonna have, you know, almost 1,000 foot-pounds of torque in this one, or if you have the high output, you're gonna have 1,000 foot-pounds of torque literally out of the box with a 100,000 mile warranty. My truck, I could make that number, but I would have no warranty. I'd have to be building the transmission, I have to be doing a tune, I have to be doing probably injectors, probably turbo, head studs, valve springs, connecting rods. I mean, it starts to get like a long list of items, right? And so it depends on whether you want something that's out of the box, warranted, ready to go, or if you want something that you can tinker with, play with, and kind of make your own. If you want something that's warranted out of the box, it's really hard to beat these new trucks in terms of power delivery and output. Now, unfortunately, if you want a manual transmission, that is no longer an option. Ram ended that in 2018, and they were really the only heavy-duty manufacturer even offering a manual transmission in that new of a truck. So sadly, manuals are out the window unless you want to go something older. So like the replacement for my 3rd gen, the new truck that I have is an 06 with a manual, which I could not get in a new truck. So that's kind of a cool little feature. So if you like manuals, you're going to be getting something older. Now, on the topic of the engine, that is where the biggest difference is, and that is emissions equipment. So on this truck, you are going to have full emissions equipment. And what that means is EGR, or exhaust gas recirculation, in the engine bay. And then after that, you're going to have the entire after treatment system in the exhaust stream. So you're going to have SCR, or selective catalyst reduction, which is injecting DEF, or diesel exhaust fluid, to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions out of the exhaust. You're also going to have the DPF, or diesel particulate filter, in the exhaust stream, again, to reduce emissions. And this is just adding complexity to these trucks. At this point in time, the 2019 Plus trucks get fantastic mileage even with the emission stuff. So I think a lot of the arguments of the mileage benefits, like on the older 3rd gens where it's like 08 to 12, those trucks got horrible mileage with the emission systems intact. On these 19 Plus trucks, I will pull 20 plus in this truck, no problem, on a road trip with 38s on it. So I think the mileage argument's out the window, but in terms of reliability, there's definitely a lot more moving parts, a lot more things involved, a lot more sensors, complexity, all that stuff on these trucks. There's no way around it. I will say pretty much everything after about 2018, 2015 or so has been very reliable in terms of the after treatment systems. Not a whole lot of issues, and they are warranted for 100,000 miles. So they're not terrible, but if you're looking at in terms of complexity and simplicity, that's where the older trucks win. I think that's why a lot of people are really, really interested in the older trucks right now, is because they don't have any of the emission systems. They never will have to have them. They're not required to. And so because of that, you just have a lot more simplistic drivetrain on the truck. I have to say, these new trucks are incredibly reliable in terms of the emission systems. They have very few issues. They have very few problems. Fuel economy is good. And so it wouldn't scare me away from getting one of these new trucks. Like if it wasn't for the price tag, the emission system wouldn't be the defining factor on why you would get a new truck or not. Now, speaking of price tag, I think that's also where it gets interesting. So this truck's stickered at like 68, and then it's got, significant amount of modifications on it. My truck stickered, I don't know, somewhere in the 40s to 50s or something, and then it's got a significant amount of modifications on it. But of course, my truck was not, a sticker price truck when I bought it. I bought that truck for mid-20s and then put the modifications on it. And so my truck with all the modifications on it is still cheaper than buying this truck stock. That is a big argument. So if you want something where you don't have to have a loan, where you want something that you can own outright, and you just want an overall cheaper price of entry and price of ownership, the old trucks definitely win. In terms of the new trucks, you got a high sticker price, right? Most of these trucks are stickering in the mid 60s all the way up to $90,000 if you're buying them new. And that is a big, big pill to swallow. Plus, most of us want to modify the truck, so if you're starting at something that's $80,000 and then you're going to put another 15, 20K mods into it, you have a $100,000 truck. It's kind of crazy at this point. So if our finances are tight or you wanted to kind of make the most of your dollar, I definitely think the older trucks are 100% the way to go. While the new truck is practical, I'll give it that, there is nothing that can compare to driving one of these older trucks in terms of sound, feel, and everything else. And I think it really comes down to kind of making an emotional or a rational choice. If you're being rational, it's pretty clear that the new truck's better. But if you're being emotional, that's where this one comes in. I mean, looking at the interior, everything's a lot cheaper, a lot plasticier. This was from the Daimler Chrysler era, right? So that meant that all of these parts came out of a parts bin. So this same steering wheel was on a PT Cruiser, it was on this truck, it was on pretty much the entire line to try and make the company as profitable as possible, unfortunately. So even though this is one of my favorite trucks, unfortunately it came from the era of Chrysler that's kind of one of the worst in terms of cheapness. So not quite the second gen level of like the interior falling apart and everything, but definitely everything feels plasticky. It feels kind of like a parts bin truck. You know, the AC controls are the same as every other Daimler Chrysler vehicle from the era. Like, there's definitely some downsides. But that said, I think this is a very, very fun truck to drive. There is, of course, one other thing that new trucks cannot say or do, and that's this. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's something to be said about a loud, fun truck. And The reason why this truck is that way is because it's a pre-emissions truck. So like I mentioned earlier, this truck has no diesel particulate filter. It has no DEF urea injection system. All it has is a cat, and I have a 5-inch straight pipe after that. And you can't do that on a newer truck, right? That is just something that you cannot do on a newer vehicle if you want to try and meet 50 state emissions. If you're somewhere that doesn't have emissions testing, that's fine. But for us in California, that's a big selling point for these older trucks. That's kind of one of the reasons that I went and got one of these trucks. As dumb as it sounds, is the sound of it. It's just, there's something fun about this. And I think while we can, you should do it. It's one of those things that's not going to be around forever. They're not going to make these trucks anymore. And so there's just something about that experience of driving it that I love. Now this truck has exactly the same suspension system as the other truck. All granted, the suspension platform is completely different. So this truck has a control arm front end, leaf spring rear end. And the other truck, if you mentioned, I remember me talking about that, it has a radius arm coil front end. And in the rear, it's going to be coil springs as well with a 4-link design. So significantly smoother. So even though these are both on the Dominator system, they both have pretty much the nicest thing you can throw at these trucks. The 5th gen truck is going to be smoother. That 2019 is always smoother in every situation. This truck does tow a little bit better than that truck, but here we are on the freeway going over some potholes and stuff. And you can notice like this truck is just not as smooth, even though it has pretty much everything you can throw at it. It's on 37s, it's on 3.0 Kings, it's got the works. The other thing too that these trucks kind of falter on is steering. So this truck has everything that you can throw at it in terms of steering. It has a new box, everything, ball joints from Carly, Synergy HD steering linkage, you name it. And the steering still has a little bit of play, it still wanders a little bit. And that's just part of being an older truck. There's just no way around the fact that this is an older vehicle. So even though I put a ton of money at making this thing as, you know, future-proof and contemporary as possible, it's still an older platform, and they've made legitimate changes to the platform to improve it that you're not getting on one of these older trucks. The other thing, of course, is drivetrain. So the new truck is a 6.7 liter Cummins mated to a 6-speed 68 RFE transmission. And that transmission is at the end of its lifespan, meaning it is basically as good as it's going to get. They've done valve body changes on it for 2019. They've done hard parts changes on it. It is actually very solid, reliable transmission at factory power levels, no matter what anyone tells you online, because everyone loves to complain about those. They're actually very reliable at factory power. This truck has a 48 RE, so this was kind of the end of the 48, so it's as good as it gets, but it's still a 4-speed. And so 1, you have a lack of efficiency with a 4-speed, right? You're just not always in the perfect gear. 2, I think this truck definitely struggles in terms of torque converter lockup and everything else. So this is still on the factory trans, just like the green truck. But I think factory to factory trans, there's definitely, probably the biggest struggling point of this truck is that. So in terms of power, it's easy to make power in these trucks. From the factory, they have like 600 and something foot-pounds of torque, so it's not bad. But in terms of putting that power to the ground, I think the 48 RE definitely struggles. And that's where the 2019 Plus truck really pulls ahead. Like if you take both those trucks, here I am on the freeway, if I accelerate, just like I did in the 2019, it just takes longer to put that power to the ground. The transmission doesn't quite, the torque converter doesn't lock up as quickly, doesn't lock up as efficiently, and I'm left kind of feeling like the truck is, the engine's working, but the transmission's not transmitting that power to the ground where it needs to be. The other thing worth mentioning about the interior is just how much smaller it is than the new trucks. Even if you're comparing quad cab to quad cab, and I know that the green truck is a mega cab, so that's kind of an unfair advantage for it, but quad cab to quad cab, it's just a lot smaller. The back seats in this truck are definitely cramped, they're small. If you're on a road trip with family members, they are gonna be kind of cramped in the back seat. So if you're looking for interior space and interior comfort, it's a clear win for the 2019 Plus truck. One other reason that I see people really interested in these older trucks is reliability. I see it all the time. People are like, I don't want to deal with the complexity of the emission stuff. And we talked about the emission stuff when I drove the 2019, but people are always saying, I don't want to deal with that. I want something that's simple. I want something that's reliable. And I think that's an interesting thing to talk about because I think it's kind of a myth more than anything else. I think people are afraid of something that they don't understand. The reality is that when you're buying one of these trucks, it's a used truck. This truck is from 2006, right? It's no spring chicken. And so it is very common when you buy one of these trucks that you will have to replace a lot of stuff. Front end parts, transmission parts, interior parts that have broken, you name it. I mean, these trucks have been used. And so I think there's this weird perception that these trucks are reliable, or more reliable, and they're more simple, they're easier to work on, but I wouldn't say that they're any more reliable than new trucks. I think at this point, the emission systems have been figured out, the kinks have been ironed out, they're extremely reliable. From all the trucks that I know, the 19 plus trucks, the 14 plus even Cummins trucks, they're extremely reliable. It is rare to have a problem with the emission system. And yes, these trucks don't have that, right? That's less parts, it's less complexity, it's less things to go wrong. But I think the myth that these trucks are gonna be more reliable than a new one is a little bit false, because they're just older. And so it's not that the trucks are bad, it's just that as stuff gets old, it wears out and you have to replace it. It's all the small stuff, right? It's like air compressor, or it's the compressor for the AC. It's all those little things that start to nickel and dime you that you don't have on a new truck. And so the driveline is extremely, extremely reliable, but the little stuff starts to add up, and I think kind of negates that argument that the older trucks are more reliable. So look, what's the final deal here? So I would say the reason why that I bought these old trucks is there will always be new trucks. These trucks will always be available. Heck, I can always buy one of these used later down the line, but they're never gonna make pre-emissions trucks again. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you can, you may as well, because we won't be able to for very long. Like, this is something that these trucks are only getting older. They're never gonna make them again. Heck, California's probably gonna outlaw them at some point. And so my thing is, you might as well do it while you still can. Yes, my truck is less comfortable than this one. Yes, it is less refined than this one, but it's fun. I can modify it, I can put tunes on it, I can do all kinds of stuff to the suspension, I can put a straight pipe exhaust on it, I can do all this stuff that I couldn't do to this one. So if you're someone like me that likes to tinker with your vehicle, that likes to mess with it, 100% the old trucks are the way to go. It's just simpler, there's more that you can do to them. On these trucks, yes, they're more comfortable, all that stuff, but you can't do that stuff. You can't have fun with it. You can't have that like connection to it. You can't have a manual transmission. So I do think that, sure, I'll probably get a new truck one day, but right now I want to enjoy the old trucks while I still can, because I won't be able to forever. I think there's a lot of people in that ballpark too. Thank you guys so much for watching. What I'm really curious about is which one of these trucks you would buy. Comment down below, let us know. I'm actually genuinely curious. I know I've bought all the old trucks, but I'd probably buy a new one if I wasn't doing this for fun and wasn't, you know, if I had kids and a family and everything else. But comment down below. I'm curious what you guys would drive. Thank you so much for watching. And by the way, if you haven't seen it yet, got merch on the website. So check the link down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate the subscription, and I will catch you on the next video.